All right, well, welcome to one of my favorite trainings. This is the ultimate open house, gaining scorching hot buyer and seller clients. And as I mentioned, since this is primarily our listing package, I will go over this to just kind of give you both viewpoints. But honestly, you're going to get quite a few seller leads or seller clients actually, because when you're in the open house, you're kind of already on your appointment. If you remember my last system, it's generating leads. So the lead generation system in this case is the actual open house and all the prep work you do prior to get the people into the home. Then the other part of the last method, or the second part of the last method, is the appointment setting. Well, you're in the home with them. You can set the appointment on the spot, and then signatures. And I say signatures meaning either get a buyer rep agreement signed or a listing agreement signed. But it's really more so about gaining them as clients. So when you're meeting someone face to face, everything that you typically do that takes maybe 3 or 4 days when you first meet them over the phone can happen in the first hour in an open house. So the more familiar you get with the strategy of talking to people over the phone, learning your informal presentation through a script, learning your formal presentation through a very um, high converting presentation, the better off you're going to do when you're in person at these open houses. So everything in this course kind of helps you stack more and more things together so that you just get better at everything you do. So truthfully, I say triple your listings, but if you were to master everything that we talk about throughout this training, because one stacks on top of the next and helps you create that snowball effect, 6 to 12 months from now, that's really what you're trying to look at. And especially if you're calculating those numbers in the lead evolution pipeline math, because honestly, all the leads that you get, even though you may only work 2 or 3 today, if you continue to nurture them properly, then they're going to come up in 6 to 12 months while you're still out marketing and doing the same things over and over. So when you have one of those ridiculous months where you outdo anything you've ever done all combined, it'll all be because of the seeds you planted 12 months earlier. And that's the way you got to think. Your strategies have to be planned for a year, not for one event. And with that, I'll jump right into how the ultimate open house does exactly that for you. All right, so I'm sure many people would love to have 20 people at an open house. So that's literally what we're going to talk about today. Some of the challenges I've seen, 0 people show up. Every time I do an event and I talk about the open houses and I ask people if they've ever had 0 people show up, every hand in the room goes up. I've asked some people if they've ever had anyone show up and they've sat through several open houses and no one has ever shown up. Then they say they can't get people to sign in. Okay, the strategy I use is about 95 to 98% effective. I don't have a problem with people ever signing in. Very rarely does a person say they won't sign in with the technique that I use and then can't convert to clients. Well, if you're not thinking that the open house is your office for the day, well, then of course you're not going to convert clients. If you were in your office and someone walked in the door, you'd do everything you could to help them find a home. And it wouldn't be just the home you're sitting in. Your office would be literally designed to help them find other places they could look for if the one they were currently asking about didn't work out for them. You'd have a script, you'd have language to help them figure out what other homes are available. Well, you have to think exactly the same way when you're doing an open house, and you don't know how often to have them. And I'll cover all those things. But the bottom line is it has to be a strategy and not a one-time event. I often hear people say that open houses don't work, and I'll say to them, it's not that the open house doesn't work, it's just that you didn't work the open house. So you end up just sitting in a house that was open. First off, it's an open house campaign strategy. Like I said, it has to be in your mind something you're planning to do for a year. And if you're not willing to do it for a year, then as I said, you're probably not willing to do real estate, because there's really nothing in real estate that's going to help you do the big numbers that last less than a year anyway. People aren't going to trust anyone in any business if they say they're in business today and 6 months later they're not still around. So if you're not even planning for a year in your own strategy, what does that say about your business planning and your goals? So you got to think about it from the standpoint that here's one strategy to help you get leads just one time a month. And I break it down so that you can see exactly what that entails using my formula for list or for doing open houses, which in fact is a lot more time every week than it would be for your standard open house. First off, again, you got to recognize it is a strategy, not an event. Then you got to pick an area to farm. And I talked about that in the Facebook branding. So obviously Facebook is part of this, but this is the actual open house itself that you're going to do all the physical work. Then you got to commit to 12 months. and follow the checklist. Now, I'll run through the checklist at the end of this, but there's always a checklist attached to all of my trainings. So you can basically keep a notebook with each of the different types of checklists that I have designed. And after you've watched my videos a few times, those checklists will just be like clockwork. You go through, and every step in the checklist you need to follow verbatim, probably 10 days out. But as it says here, you're campaigning for leads and capturing leads. The open house campaign strategy, it is a strategy. And then every listing, that's one opportunity to do an open house. Again, once a month. If you're not doing a listing, then you have to do it from that standpoint, or you can go to builders. So whether it's a builder, a listing, or just a random open house once a month, just make it a point to schedule an open house every month and to do one. So the way I like to make it clear to people is 8 hours is what it takes for me to do an open house. And that's all the printing, the paperwork, and everything else is required to get it done. And you do 12 of those a year, that's 12 times 12 months. That's 96 hours of work that you spent doing that. So let's say that you only get one single client and that purchases the home with the average sales price in San Antonio, and you end up walking away with $4,000 for that one open house. Well, you divide 4,000 by 12, and that equals $333. That is a 8-hour work day that you're getting paid $333. How many people make $333 in 8 hours today? So if you think about it from that standpoint, it's not really that bad a deal, considering you're only doing 8 hours of work for the entire month. So if you think about it from that standpoint, it's well worth it to do an open house. But I can pretty much guarantee you that if you do these open houses consistently and people get used to seeing you in the neighborhoods, then you're going to do way more than one deal. And in a lot of cases, you're going to see where the person that comes in the house is actually looking for a house and they also have one to sell. So there's where your sellers come in. The clients that I had where this worked out for me, they walked in, I was doing a builder open house. They walked in and they were looking for a home in the $400,000 range, and the home they had, even though they only paid like maybe the low 200s, um, it had now appreciated up to about $300,000, and they were ready to sell it. And so at this point, we put it on the market for 325, and the home they were looking for was 450. So as you can see, that's almost $800,000 worth of transactions, a lot different than the numbers you're looking at here. So just think about that: $800,000 worth of transactions at 3%, and that's the kind of check you're looking at. That's more than some people are going to make their entire year at their job. So if you're not willing to do open houses to just meet one client like that, then you understand how much money you're losing. But don't think of it as an event that you're going to one time and it doesn't work. If the strategy doesn't work after a year, that's one thing. That means you didn't do something right. If it, and I ask people this all the time. It's like the definition of Einstein's definition of insanity. If you go to an open house and 0 people show up, when you do the second one, are you not going to change a single thing? You're going to do the exact same thing you did the first time. And that's why it didn't make any sense to me, because the first time I went to an open house, it wasn't even one for me. It was for a realtor when I was in the mortgage business, and no one showed up at all. We sat there talking, and there was a fishbowl between us. I think one person showed up, but it was actually a realtor who didn't even bring their client. They just wanted to see the house so they could talk about bringing their client back another time. So from that standpoint, it did absolutely nothing for me as a loan officer. And when I switched over to the real estate side, I wanted to make sure that didn't happen for me at all. And I used a lot of the strategies that I picked up from doing open houses when I was in the loan business, and I converted it. And now from going from a third of a page checklist to now a page and a half. All right, but one of the big things you got to determine when you're doing open houses is, what is the purpose of the open house? It's not to sell the house. One of the events I went to, the clients were literally, or correction, the audience was answering the question, and one person said to sell the house. And I said, no, that's just a fortunate occurrence. It happens less than 1/100th of the time. And he's like, so what is the purpose? And I said, to capture leads, to generate more buyer business. Hopefully someone comes in there that's not represented, and you can represent them. And he literally says, so you're telling me I've been lied to for 6 years? So if you can imagine that people have been told that open houses are designed for them to sell that person's house, and it's not even their listing, what benefit do you get out of that if someone comes in represented? So bottom line is, when you're looking at open houses, you're campaigning for prospects, capturing leads, you connect with those leads, you convert those leads to clients, get clients into contracts, and you close those transactions. That's the purpose of the open house. With that, I will stop here, and then we'll pick up with converting presentations by setting the appointments and getting the signatures. This is how you convert those leads to clients, or correction, convert those leads to appointments, and then convert those appointments to clients. All right, I'll see you on the next video.